You are seeing this because your soul has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. There comes a moment when the psyche recognizes that a threshold has been passed, a point of no return that cannot be softened by nostalgia or undone by longing. You may not yet have words for it, but you know it. Something inside you shifted, quietly, rearranged, delayed for a long time, and yet now irreversible. While you were fighting, while you were trying to be chosen, trying to be loved, trying to hold on, something far more important was happening beneath the surface. The real test was taking place in secret. It was never about whether the other person chose you. It was about whether you chose yourself when everything inside you was screaming not to. This is the test no one prepares you for, the test that does not announce itself, the test that happens in the silence of your own heart. It does not demand your flexibility, it demands your loyalty to what is most intimate and most true within you. Love at its deepest level has very little to do with the other person. It reveals how deeply you are rooted in yourself. Can you remain whole when everything invites you to disappear? How many times did you cross your own boundaries? How often did you silence your truth, minimize your needs, soften your voice, just to keep the connection alive? This test was brutal precisely because it was invisible. No one but you knows how many times you betrayed yourself in the hope of being loved. And that knowledge changes you forever. There is a psychological truth that can only be learned through experience. We do not attract the people we deserve. We attract the people who reveal our unconscious patterns. The relationship did not happen by accident. It was not a mistake. It was an invitation to look directly into your own soul and see what had not yet been integrated. The psyche does not work in straight lines. It moves in cycles. It brings us back to the same themes again and again, until we finally understand them, not just intellectually, but somatically, emotionally, existentially. Jung spoke of individuation as the path towards psychological wholeness. And on that path, relationships often become the battlefield. Not because the other person is the enemy, but because they carry the frequency of what remains unhealed within us. The person who wounded you most deeply was not random. They mirrored the wound you had not yet redeemed. They reflected something ancient that you carried silently, something that originated long before this relationship ever began. Perhaps it was the wound of invisibility, the feeling of never being fully seen, of never quite being enough. Perhaps it was the longing for unconditional love that was never met when you needed it most. That wound was activated, and you tried to heal it through the relationship. You tried to cross into the other, to merge, to be chosen completely, without realizing that the healing you were seeking could only come from within. The test was designed to teach you this, not as a concept, but as a lived truth. Jung understood that transformation does not happen in the laboratory of thought. It happens in the cauldron of lived experience. This relationship was your athanor, the alchemical furnace in which your old identity had to burn so that something truer could emerge. Gold is not created, it is purified, and you were purified by this fire. What died in you was not your capacity to love. What died was the belief that you must abandon yourself in order to be loved. You learned painfully and completely the difference between loving and needing love to feel alive. Love that arises from lack is not love. It is dependence. Love that arises from inner abundance is a choice. This distinction is subtle, but once felt, it changes everything. Every time you made yourself smaller, every time you stayed silent when something inside you wanted to speak, every time you ignored the tightening in your chest or the quiet warning in your body, you were being shown the cost of self-betrayal. The psyche keeps score. It remembers. And eventually, it demands reckoning. There is a moment when the inner voice grows louder than the fear of loss, when staying true to yourself becomes less painful than abandoning yourself again. That is the moment you are in now. It does not feel triumphant. It feels sober, grounded, clear. You are no longer willing to negotiate your worth. Not because you are hardened, but because you are awake. This awakening does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with a quiet refusal. A refusal to keep bleeding for connection. A refusal to keep calling sacrifice love. A refusal to confuse intensity with intimacy. You see now what you could not see before, that the test was never about saving the relationship. It was about saving yourself. And here is the most difficult truth of all. The relationship had to fail in order for you to pass the test. If it had worked, you might never have been forced to confront how deeply you were willing to abandon yourself for love. The loss was not punishment, it was initiation. You stand now on the other side of that initiation, not healed in a simplistic way, not untouched, but integrated in a way you have never been before. You carry the knowledge in your body. You know what it costs to betray yourself. And you know that you will not pay that price again. This is the threshold you crossed, and there is no going back. Something crossed a line inside you, didn't it? Something that violated your dignity in a way you can no longer ignore. Not because someone else did something unforgivable, but because for the first time you saw clearly where you abandoned your own inner child, where protection should have existed and did not. The deepest betrayal was not external, it happened within you, and the test revealed it with ruthless clarity. It forced you to look directly at the moments where you disappointed yourself, the moments where you knew the truth and still chose silence, where you felt the contraction in your body and stepped forward anyway, where you crossed your own inner boundary in the hope that love would finally arrive if you just endured a little more. The unconscious mind does not exist in isolation. It carries archetypal patterns of love, attachment, abandonment, and separation that flow through generations. The way your grandmother loved, the way your mother learned to survive, love, the way your father withdrew or demanded. These patterns did not disappear just because you promised yourself you would be different. They lived quietly inside you, shaping your instincts, your attractions, your tolerances. The test exposed these transgenerational imprints. You may now recognize familiar dynamics repeating themselves in your relationships. Perhaps you unconsciously reenacted your mother's longing, her self-erasure, her hope that patience would one day be rewarded. Perhaps you embodied your father's emotional distance, or attracted it, even while swearing you never would. Awareness is not punishment. Awareness is liberation. Jung understood that consciousness is the first true act of freedom. He warned of the savior archetype, the compulsion to feel valuable by carrying another person's pain. Not out of cruelty, but out of an unconscious belief that love must be earned through sacrifice. Perhaps you tried to rescue what could not be saved. Perhaps you poured energy into someone who was not willing to face themselves. This realization hurts because it dismantles the illusion that your love alone could transform another human being. When that illusion collapses, it feels like loss. But what remains is not emptiness. It is space. Space that was previously occupied by effort, vigilance, self-monitoring, and emotional labor. Space where you can finally return to yourself, to who you are when no one is watching, when no expectations weigh on you, when you are not performing, fixing, waiting, or proving. This emptiness is not punishment, it is cleansing. Everything that did not belong had to be removed so that truth could have a place to land. In depth psychology, there is a process known as regressive restoration, where the psyche temporarily retreats before it can reorganize itself at a higher level. The sense of being lost after separation is not the end. It is the beginning of reintegration. Your psyche is gathering its scattered fragments, Pieces that were handed away, compromised or silenced are being called back. This phase is necessary, even when it feels disorienting. You are seeing this now because you are ready, not before. Jung would have called this synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence between inner development and outer encounter. These words did not find you by chance. Months ago, you might have read something similar and felt nothing. Now you recognize yourself because something inside you has grown. This is Kairos, the right time for the soul, not calendar time but inner time. The transformation that occurred within you is not visible to the naked eye, but it will be felt by everyone you encounter. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to announce anything. There is a different density to your presence now, a quiet refusal of what is not authentic. People sense it even if they cannot name it. Jung described the transcendent function as the psyche's ability to hold opposites until something new emerges. You were once caught between longing for love and fearing annihilation. The test forced you to experience both extremes fully until a third position could be born, the capacity to love without fear. Not because love became safe, but because you no longer abandon yourself within it. Some wounds can only heal once the bleeding stops. As long as pain is actively repeating, the psyche remains in survival mode. True healing does not occur in emergency. It happens when you step out of crisis and into understanding. You are there now. You can look back without collapsing. You can understand without condemning. You can let go without resentment. The waiting is over. Not because someone finally changed, but because you no longer require external resolution to move forward. What you gained through this was not closure, it was sovereignty. You learned, not theoretically but viscerally, that your dignity is non-negotiable, that love which requires self-erasure is not love, that staying loyal to yourself is the highest form of intimacy you can offer another. You are no longer asking whether you are enough. You are asking whether something is aligned. That is the shift. That is the line you crossed. And once crossed, it cannot be uncrossed. You stopped waiting for the other person to change so that you could finally be seen, so that things might one day improve. Without realizing it, you became the change you were waiting for. This is the turning point, after which there is no return. Your frequency shifted, not as a rational decision, not as a promise you made to yourself, but as a visceral reaction. Your body knew before your mind could explain it. Your nervous system, your energy, your entire inner orientation began to reject what you once tolerated out of fear of loss. Conditional love no longer fits. Love that appears and disappears. Love that shrinks you. Love that makes you question your worth. All of it feels incompatible with what you now carry inside. You cannot hold it anymore, even if you tried. It is not willpower, it is alignment. What once felt familiar now feels foreign. What once felt exciting now feels draining. What once felt necessary now feels impossible. People who were once central to your life begin to fade away without conflict, without drama, without confrontation. Jung spoke of resonance between unconscious structures. When something shifts within you, the field around you reorganizes. Those who were connected to your wound felt familiar. Those who were connected to your healing now feel aligned. This is not rejection. It is not punishment. It is drift, natural, quiet, inevitable. There is no longer an agreement at the energetic level. The version of you that once made itself small to be accepted cannot survive in this new, internal climate. The persona you wore, the adaptive mask designed to please, to endure, to belong, no longer matches the truth that lives in you now. Jung described the persona as necessary, but dangerous when mistaken for the self. The old persona must dissolve when it no longer serves authenticity. A new way of being emerges, less polished, less performative, more grounded, more honest, less interested in approval, more rooted in self-respect. What once looked like failure begins to reveal itself as initiation. What once felt like loss begins to feel like liberation. Guilt fades when you understand that you did not fail at love. You matured through it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of despair was part of a process that brought you back to yourself. You are wearing something different now, not externally but internally. A coherence, a dignity, an alignment that cannot be faked. You are no longer searching, no longer chasing, no longer proving. You have become what you were seeking in another. This is the quiet power of integration. Jung taught that we often search for others to embody what we have not yet developed within ourselves. Women frequently project the inner masculine, clarity, boundaries, direction. Men often project the inner feminine, intuition, emotional depth, receptivity. The test of love forces the withdrawal of these projections. It demands that you integrate what you once sought externally. The shadow we project onto others contains not only what we deny, but also what we have not yet claimed. The strength you admired, the wisdom you longed for, the stability you depended on. Much of it was dormant within you, waiting to be activated. The relationship did not create these qualities, it revealed them. You are no longer trying to complete yourself through another. That does not mean you no longer desire connection. It means you no longer require it to feel whole. You are complete. From that completeness, you can choose partnership without desperation, intimacy without self-erasure, love without collapse. The energy you once spent holding things together, explaining yourself, adapting, rescuing, sustaining illusions, now returns to you. Jung called this psychic energy libido, not merely sexual energy but life force. This force, which once felt depleted, is now available again. You feel it in your body, in your breath, in your capacity to say no without guilt and yes without fear. This is not arrogance, it is embodiment. You are no longer negotiating your essence. You are no longer bargaining for belonging. You are standing where you are, fully present, fully aware, fully responsible for your own life. And this changes everything. Your presence carries a different weight now, not louder, not more forceful, but denser, clearer, more anchored. People feel it even if they cannot articulate it. Some are drawn closer, others quietly step away. Both responses are correct. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer mistake longing for love. You no longer interpret suffering as proof of depth. You understand now that real connection does not require self-abandonment. That love which cost you your dignity is not love at all. What you passed through was not meant to destroy you. It was meant to strip away what was false, to burn away dependency, to return your power to you. You did not lose yourself. You found yourself. And from this place, life does not become easier, but it becomes truer. You move differently. You choose differently. You love differently. You remain. The test is over. And you passed, not by holding on, but by letting go. You will feel it moving through your creativity first, a quiet expansion. Ideas arrive without force. Clarity sharpens without strain. Your presence carries a gravity that no longer depends on effort. Things that once felt impossible do not announce themselves as miracles. They simply become doable, accessible, natural. This is because a different kind of love is now possible for you, not fusion, not collapse, not the desperate merging of two incomplete selves trying to survive through each other. What becomes available now is the meeting of two sovereign beings, two people who have chosen themselves first, not because they no longer desire connection, but because they no longer need another to feel whole. This distinction changes everything. Love is no longer an attempt to fill an inner absence. It becomes a conscious sharing between two lives that already stand on their own. Two paths that remain distinct yet mutually enriching. No more bargaining. No more self-erasure. No more shrinking to preserve attachment. You are no longer compelled to explain who you have become. You do not need to justify your evolution. True transformation does not ask for witnesses. It carries its own authority. You know who you are now, and that knowing is sufficient. It is a quiet sovereignty. It does not raise its voice. It does not defend itself, and yet it is unmistakable. Others feel it even when you say nothing. The real test was passed long before the relationship ended. It was past the moment you stopped fighting to be chosen and began choosing yourself. Not when the story concluded, but when you decided, internally, irrevocably, that your integrity mattered more than the illusion of being loved at any cost. That was the turning point. That was the moment your psyche said, "Enough. I choose myself." From there, everything changes. Not because the external world immediately rearranges itself, but because you are no longer the same person. Moving through it, the future will not mirror the past, not because life becomes easier, but because you respond differently. You make different decisions, you set different boundaries, you tolerate far less distortion. This shift cannot be undone. There is no returning to who you were before. This is not an ending. It is the beginning of a different way of existing. Those who face the deepest tests in love do not return unchanged. What survives does not revert. It is reborn into what was always there, beneath the fear, beneath the adaptation, beneath the self-abandonment. You are now inhabiting that self. The integration of opposites, the key to this transformation, has begun within you. You are no longer dependent on another person to carry what you once lacked. You have learned to embody strength without rigidity, vulnerability without collapse. You have learned clarity without cruelty, compassion without self-betrayal. This is the union of the inner opposites, anima and animus, yin and yang, light and shadow. Jung wrote that enlightenment does not come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. You have looked into your darkness. You have seen where you abandoned yourself, where you acted from fear, where you avoided truth, and you survived it. More than that, you grew through it. The shadow work you have done, whether deliberately or simply through lived experience, has made you more whole. You are no longer divided between what you present and what you hide. You are no longer performing coherence while suppressing contradiction. You are learning to accept yourself as a complete being, scars included. This is individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Your wounds have not vanished, your history has not been erased, but they no longer define you. They are chapters, not the conclusion. You have learned to live with them without allowing them to dictate your choices. This is maturity. This is freedom. The relationships that enter your life now will be different. Not because you are searching for better people, but because you are vibrating differently. You attract what you are, not what you hope to become, and because you have changed, what meets you will change as well. There is also a subtle but profound shift in how you experience conflict. What once felt like a threat, a sign of impending loss or failure, now appears as information, an invitation to deepen understanding, a moment of discernment rather than panic. You no longer rush to fix, you no longer rush to save, you no longer rush to silence yourself for peace. You remain present, you listen, you choose. And that changes the entire dynamic, because love no longer asks you to disappear. Connection no longer demands sacrifice of your truth. Intimacy no longer requires self-neglect. What you passed through was not meant to break you. It was meant to initiate you, to return you to yourself with clarity and dignity intact. You are no longer seeking completion outside yourself. You are sharing from wholeness. This is the life that begins after the greatest test in love. Not louder, not easier, but unmistakably yours. Clarity arrives not as an explosion, but as a settling, a deep inner knowing that no longer trembles when truth is spoken. You are no longer afraid of conflict because you understand something essential now. Real connection can only grow from honesty. Anything that requires silence of the soul is not intimacy, it is avoidance. This realization quietly reshapes every future relationship you will ever enter. There will be no perfect love waiting for you. There never was. But there can be a true one, a love rooted in reality rather than illusion, a love in which you are not required to perform, dilute or overextend yourself to be chosen, a love where you can simply be who you are, without effort, without strategy, without fear of disappearance. In this kind of love, conflict is not a threat. It is not a sign of failure or an omen of loss. It is information, it is movement, it is growth. You no longer interpret tension as danger. You see it as a place where truth asks to be spoken and heard. This is the gift hidden inside the test you endured. You learned through pain that love does not mean abandoning yourself. Love is not endurance. Love is not silence. Love is not shrinking. Love is the meeting of two people in full presence, without the need to change the other or deny the self. That understanding did not come gently. It was born through loss, through grief, through the dismantling of illusions you once depended on. And that is why it carries weight. What you brought back from the darkness is not bitterness, but wisdom. Not armor, but clarity. The inner marriage has begun. The union of opposites within your own psyche is no longer theoretical, it is lived. You are no longer searching for a missing half because you have recognized your own wholeness. This single realization alters everything. It removes desperation from love and replaces it with choice. You no longer love because you lack. You love because you have something to give. This distinction may seem subtle, but it is vast. It is the difference between captivity and freedom, between dependence and autonomy, between fear and trust. The silence within you has changed its quality. It is no longer the silence of suppression, of walking on eggshells, of holding yourself back. It is the quiet of presence, the stillness of someone who no longer needs to constantly explain, justify, or defend their existence. You can simply be, and in that being, there is a power greater than words. The power of someone who has come home to themselves. The cycles of pain have been broken, not because you will never suffer again, but because you no longer repeat suffering unconsciously. You recognize patterns before they take hold. You see warning signs before you are deeply entangled. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy or chaos with passion. This is discernment, and it only comes through experience. Now you can love without losing yourself. You can give without dissolving. You can open without fear that vulnerability will be weaponized against you. Not because you are invulnerable, not because you have found perfect people, but because you trust yourself to stand, regardless of outcome. Trust returns. Not the naive trust of beginnings, but a mature trust that knows not everyone deserves access and still understands that love is worth risking again. You trust with your eyes open. You love with clarity and boundaries. You no longer confuse openness with exposure. The masks have fallen. You no longer present a version of yourself designed to be lovable. You show up as you are and trust that the right people will remain, and those who leave were never meant to stay in the first place. This understanding is not bitter, it is liberating. Jung described the self as the goal of psychological development, the integration of all parts of the personality into a living whole. You are no longer approaching this as an idea, you are living it. Day by day, you are becoming more of who you truly are, beneath conditioning, beneath fear, beneath inherited expectations. And now you arrive at the most important declaration of all. The greatest act of love you can make does not depend on another person. It is directed inward. A quiet, unwavering vow. I choose myself. I choose my Truth. I will not abandon myself again, no matter what. This is the foundation upon which everything else stands. Without it, every form of love eventually collapses. With it, love becomes possible without destruction. You survived what could have broken you. That survival is not accidental. It is evidence of your inner strength, and that strength will carry you forward through whatever comes next. You are no longer a victim of your history. You are the author of what comes after, and from here on, every step you take belongs to you. This is the future you are stepping into, not a fantasy, not a promise made by someone else, but a reality shaped by what you reclaimed within yourself. This is the power that returned to you. The archetypal forces within your psyche have shifted. Something ancient has been reorganized. The figure who once sacrificed herself endlessly for the love of another has loosened her grip. The inner gatekeeper who confused suffering with devotion has stepped aside. In her place, integrity has awakened. This internal restructuring does not arrive with spectacle. There is no dramatic collapse, no loud declaration. It happens quietly, beneath the surface, but its effects are unmistakable. You begin to act from different impulses. You respond rather than react. You choose rather than endure. Your movements come from a deeper knowing of your own worth. You are no longer negotiating your existence. The journey is not over. In truth, it is only beginning. But you are beginning from a different place now. Not from fragmentation, but from wholeness. Not from confusion, but from clarity. Not from self-denial, but from self-respect. And that changes everything. Where you once asked what you needed to do to be loved, you now ask what aligns with your truth. Where you once feared loss more than dishonesty, you now fear self-betrayal more than solitude. Where you once waited to be chosen, you now stand rooted in choice. This is not hardness. It is grounding. You move through the world differently now, not louder, not colder, but steadier. Your presence no longer seeks permission. You no longer chase validation. You no longer measure your worth through someone else's attention or withdrawal. You carry yourself with an inner cohesion that does not need explanation. This is what individuation looks like when it becomes lived reality, not a concept, not a theory, but a way of standing in your own life. Jung understood individuation as the return to the self, the center that holds all contradictions without collapse. You are learning to inhabit that center. You are no longer split between who you are and who you present. You are no longer abandoning one part of yourself to keep another safe. There will still be challenges. Growth does not end. Truth does not freeze. But you are now moving forward with an inner compass that was once obscured. You recognize misalignment faster. You recover your balance sooner. You trust your inner signals rather than overriding them. You listen when something tightens. You act when something opens. If you have stayed with these words until now, you already know this is not coincidence. Something in you recognizes this place. You have lived the cost of ignoring yourself. You have felt what it does to stay where your soul is shrinking, and you have survived it. What you went through was not wasted. It brought you here, to this moment of recognition, to this point beyond return. There is no going back to unconsciousness. No returning to the version of yourself who could tolerate less truth. Once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you choose yourself, that choice echoes forward. This is not arrogance. This is responsibility. Responsibility for your life, your energy, your presence in the world. You are not alone on this path, even when it feels solitary. Others are walking it in their own quiet ways. Each person who chooses integrity over illusion strengthens the field for another. Individuation may be a solitary process, but it does not have to be isolating. There is connection in shared truth, even when the paths look different. If you are ready to continue deeper, to keep facing what is real within you, even when it is uncomfortable, then you already know what to do. Let go of the masks, lay down the old performances, live the life that actually fits who you have become. Notice what resonated, notice what shifted. Speak it if you feel called. Your recognition may become permission for someone else who is standing at the same threshold. The journey toward wholeness is not about perfection. It is about honesty, not about speed, but about depth. We walk together without merging. We grow side by side without losing ourselves. Each on our own path, yet connected by the same devotion to truth. And from this place, the search ends. Not because you found everything, but because you found yourself.